Imagine a single beam of sunlight resting in the palm of your hand. It has warmth, it has presence, and it seems to occupy a specific physical space. But the moment you close your fingers to capture it, the light escapes. Now, consider a strange hypothetical. What if you could somehow peel that specific ray of light away from the star that cast it? If you severed the connection, would the sun suddenly go dark in that one precise spot, missing its stolen beam? The answer is no. The sun and its light are not two separate objects competing for real estate in the solar system. They are a single, continuous event. The light is simply the sun extending its presence across the vacuum of space. Yet, when we look at the universe, our minds stumble over this concept of continuity. We are desperate to measure, to categorize, and to chop the infinite down into disconnected, bite-sized pieces that we can actually comprehend. The 11th century Persian philosopher Nasir Khusraw recognized this blind spot. In his text, the Khwan al-Akhawan, he tackled a massive theological problem: how a human being living in a fractured, chaotic world could ever begin to understand the absolute unity of the divine. He traced the problem back to a concept called tawahum, the human faculty of illusion or imagination. Our brains are biological sorting machines, optimized to detect borders and edges. Because we rely on these artificial boundaries to make sense of reality, our imagination simply crashes when asked to picture a state of absolute, indivisible unity. Khusraw proves the absurdity of tawahum by turning back to the sun. If you imagine a sunbeam physically detaching from its source, your mind is forced to picture the original sun existing without its light. Logic dictates that placing the sun's light over here leaves a black void over there, which is a physical impossibility. He reaches a stark conclusion. The light possesses absolutely no proof of existence without the sun to project it. Conversely, the sun has no proof of its own existence without the light it casts. Khosrow maps this directly onto the architecture of the cosmos. He argues that the divine command, the initial spark of creation, and the universal intellect that shapes our world are inseparable. They are an eternal emanation, flowing continuously from the same singular point. Attempting to draw a hard line between the creator and the creation using our limited human imagination is a fool's errand. It is exactly as absurd and as physically impossible as trying to cut a sunbeam in half with a pair of scissors. This structural logic echoes far beyond medieval Persia. 8 centuries earlier, the Greek philosopher Plotinus arrived at a remarkably similar conclusion, laying the groundwork for Western Neoplatonism. Plotinus wrote about a concept he called the One, an ultimate, boundless reality. To explain how the diverse physical world spills out from this single source, he used the metaphor of a fire. A fire radiates immense heat outward into the cold, yet it never diminishes its own core temperature in the process. Jump forward to 17th century Europe, and we find Baruch Spinoza constructing his theory of substance monism. For Spinoza, the universe is not made of separate parts interacting with each other. In his framework, God and nature are completely interchangeable terms for exactly the same thing. In Spinoza's view, you, me, and the device you're watching this on are all temporary expressions, what he called modes, of one infinite substance. We are individual ripples moving across the exact same ocean. Later, Immanuel Kant would put a psychological boundary on this idea. He argued that the mechanics of human cognition, specifically our rigid filters of space and time, actively prevent us from seeing the unified thing in itself. We only ever perceive the highly edited, highly filtered version of reality our brains allow us to see. Centuries of philosophy mirror Khusraw's initial warning. Our minds are hardwired to process the scattered, broken colors of division. Because of that biological programming, we walk right past the pure white light of unity. Where philosophers used logic to map this cognitive trap, Eastern poets turned to music and metaphor to capture the feeling of it. In his epic Mathnawi, the Persian poet Rumi uses the image of a severed reed flute. The haunting sound of the flute is the wail of the human soul, mourning the perceived separation from its original reed bed. Rumi expands on this by revisiting the light metaphor. He asks us to imagine a massive, sprawling city. Above it sits one sun. But below, that sunlight is chopped up into isolated, walled-off courtyards.
Inside, the light appears independent and self-contained. Rumi argues these walls are the human ego. Destroying those walls reveals the scattered patches are feeding from the exact same source. We see this caution regarding the limits of human language in Taoism. The very first lines of the Tao Te Ching explicitly state that the moment you try to name or conceptualize the Tao, the eternal way of the universe, you instantly destroy its truth. The words themselves create false boundaries. The Huayan Buddhist tradition visualizes this absolute interdependence through Indra's net. Imagine a cosmic web stretching infinitely in all directions. At every single vertex sits a perfectly clear, multifaceted jewel. Look closely at any one jewel, and you will see the reflections of all the infinite other jewels shimmering in its surface. Across these diverse traditions, the consensus is clear. Independent, isolated existence is a myth. A single jewel, a single beam of light, or a single human being only possesses reality through its unbroken relationship to the infinite whole. These ancient philosophies were attempting to solve the problem of unity in a world that moved at the speed of a horse. Today, we live in an era of extreme fragmentation. Our attention is shattered across screens, and our daily reality is fed to us through highly polarized, isolated algorithms. The logic of Khusraw and Spinoza provides a necessary perspective for this modern sense of loneliness. If the human mind is naturally limited to seeing boundaries where none exist, then our persistent feeling of being a disconnected fragment is an inevitable result of that biological lens. We aren't actually drifting apart, we are simply trapped in the illusion of the courtyard. This also gives us a practical framework for how we approach overwhelming global problems. We have to recognize the limits of our own imagination. When we stop trying to force continuous, complex realities into rigid, divided boxes, us versus them, humanity versus nature, the actual shape of the system becomes clear. True fulfillment doesn't come from gathering more isolated fragments of information. It requires the discipline to occasionally step back from the digital noise, look at the scattered reflections in your own life, and trace them back to their primary source. We are not separate fragments wandering alone in the dark. We are the physical manifestation of the light itself, forever dancing in unison with the vast, quiet engine that cast us out into the void.